Is Affinity now setting the game? Is that so? I think the most interesting thing that came out this week or the past few days was the Adobe announcement for the iPad, so the Photoshop for the iPad. And apart from that, there was also the new Adobe Photoshop 2019 on Creative Cloud. And one thing that got my attention immediately was how many features I saw there that reminded me of things that I saw in Affinity before. Is Affinity now setting the game? Is that so? Do you think that's the case now?
Well, it's incredibly flattering for you, for anyone to kind of think that. I mean, I don't think that we probably don't have that opinion of ourselves, to be honest. We still kind of see ourselves as this very kind of small company that's just, really just trying to do the best job that we can. I can't disagree with you, though. Obviously, quite a few of the things that come out in the latest Adobe announcement were features that we already do. But I don't know. I don't think we're big-headed enough to kind of think that that's them copying us. I think that hopefully that's just a validation of some of those features that we've got.
Is it good to have someone like Adobe coming after what you guys are doing as a push to keep going with new features and better stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good. We kind of find it
scary a little bit.
No, not scary. I think that. For us, it still kind of feels like a long way. Well, right. In terms of Photoshop itself, they've said it's going to be sometime in 2019. I guess for us, one of the things will be actually what their pricing model is going to be on that. At the moment, everyone's just assuming it's going to be part of the Creative Cloud subscription. Right. Maybe if they launched it and it was a one-off purchase or something, they did something different with it, that, maybe we'd have a sort of a different view. But, obviously at the end of the day, let's not forget our desktop apps on Mac and Windows are still the massive bread and butter for us. That's still, 80% of all the money that we do. So from a commercial, and of course Adobe's already on those platforms, so we're already competing with Adobe on desktop. So I don't think it's, scary for us in that sense. I think the other kind of cool thing with us generally, in many circumstances, people aren't necessarily making a decision as to whether or not they use Adobe or us. Because we are a one-off price and a relatively low-cost price. We're finding lots of people are, buying Affinity and using it, but they still might use aspects of Creative Cloud as well. Of course, we don't have a video editor and or something like After Effects. Some of those other apps. So it's not necessarily a kind of a either or decision for people.
Right. I was waiting for a yet on that line, but
we always get asked that, and to be honest, and we've been relatively clear on it. We don't have any even remotely immediate plans to do that. The big core thing that we've done is all of those apps use pretty much the same back end. And from the very beginning, that was what was kind of in our minds, that we would build this core engine that would be suitable for dealing with vector layers, pixel layers, text layers, and we could use that same core engine on each of those apps. So that's got, and of course that's got some of the great advantages of things like shared file format and what have you. But what it does also mean is that something like an After Effects type thing, or say a video editing application, would need a totally different backend. And that isn't kind of what we've got. Never say never and all of that, but it would be a monumental task for us to go ahead and do that.
And I guess that touches in a little bit of history that not everyone knows about the company, about Serif. You guys have been around for almost 3 decades.
That's right.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And always in the same area of desktop publishing. And
I think it surprises a lot of people that Serif was actually founded in 1987, so this is our 31st year. And it's always been graphics-based based software. The big thing for us really is that when we first started out, we were mostly focused more on the kind of the consumer end of the market. So, for example, our desktop publishing product, rather than products that was great for creating things like greeting cards or newsletters for the local golf club, stuff like that. And so really our our legacy apps, kind of what we call them now, these old apps, were more focused towards the kind of consumer market, and we're also Windows only as well. And it wasn't really, we were successful with that, obviously, because the business is still around, we obviously still made money and what have you, but it wasn't really until we launched Affinity where it kind of really put the company on the map in terms of people's awareness of it and what have you. So a lot of people thought, and obviously, because we very much branded everything differently and, made this new brand of Affinity, a lot of people just thought we were a brand new startup that's just launched this new range, but actually we have been around for a very long time.
So tell me a little bit about this backstory. What's behind Affinity? When did it came alive?
Yeah, so what it was is that actually our lead developer, Tony Brightman, and a couple of his team actually really kind of formulated this idea. Obviously, they've been working on our legacy range for many years. And in the back of their mind, I think they started to build this whole new kind of concept of what they could do. And so basically they come to us and said, hey, we think we should start again. We've kind of got this idea for how a new kind of suite of creative applications could look, and how we could develop such applications. If we had the opportunity to start from scratch, we would actually be able to develop them in such a way that they'll be incredibly fast, because we can make use of all the latest technologies that's available now, make sure they're kind of pro-end from the ground up, and also make sure that they're multi-platform. So really it was a few of our developers, they said, give us the chance, to start again. And it was a kind of a big decision and quite a big gamble, because this was now maybe 9 years ago. It was perhaps 5 years before we even launched Affinity Designer that they come up with this idea, and that they were very clear, we're going to have to spend 3, 4, 5 years on this before we can launch anything. And we had this kind of fantastic opportunity really where we could self-fund it. We didn't need to get investment or anything like that. The sales that we were making on our old line meant that we could put some of our development team on Affinity, and even, it took 5 years before we could actually have a product that we could actually sell, but we could afford to do that.
Right.
So yeah.
Well, you touched on the pricing model as well, and Affinity, in a time where everyone is going subscription, Affinity took the step to, or Serif, I would say, took the step to put its products as a one-off price.
Yes.
Was that a good idea, and is that the way it's gonna continue?
When we first started developing Affinity, it was always in our mind that when we launched it, it would still just follow the one-off cost perpetual license type model, because that's the model that we'd had with our legacy range as well. It was actually during development of Affinity that Adobe switched to subscription. So, and that just kind of reinforced our view on that, because it was clearly a model that lots of people weren't necessarily very happy with, and I still kind of think that's the case. Personally, it sort of feels sort of wrong to charge a subscription, particularly if it's a high cost subscription. Now, if you've been paying $50 a month for the last 4 or 5 years, you've spent what, $3,000 or $4,000, and if you don't pay your $50 next month, you've got nothing to show for it.
Right.
And that kind of feels slightly wrong. Now, that isn't to say that we will never have any form of subscription sort of options. I think the other side of it would be if we ever have any kind of online services or other aspects of our offering that perhaps has an ongoing cost to us to support it, then of course at that stage we'd need to have an option, if people want to take that option, whatever that might be.
You have the Trinity now, right? So it's the designer, photo, and publisher.
Yeah.
What does it mean for Serif to have completed this Trinity?
Like I say, we first started developing Affinity, 9 years ago?
Right.
So, after all of that time, to finally get to the point where we've realised that very first vision of having, because it always was that vision of having these 3 apps, is does feel pretty special. That's not to say we think our work's done here, you know, at all. You know, that we still feel there's a huge amount that we want to do. And as you mentioned, obviously at the moment publisher's only in beta, so we've still got to launch that. And then of course, you know, we do have ambitions that we can get publisher onto iPad too. So really at that point we'd kind of feel that our suite is done, but we still know that there's hundreds or thousands more new features that we can get into the apps over time. And you know, we just want to keep working at it.
Very personal question and tricky one. Is there any feature in any of the apps that bugs you and then you keep bugging your development team to fix it or make something better, or anything that you would like to change personally?
I bug the development team all the time, but you know, about lots of little things. It's interesting for me, you know, because you know, actually I'm not a creative person in the sense of using creative apps all the time. One of the big things that I do is go out and demo the apps all the time. And last year I was at WWDC and I was on stage doing the iPad presentation and things like that. So, but actually sometimes that I think does give, because obviously it's very important for me that when I sort of show the apps off to people, that it kind of looks really, really slick and fast. I think that, as I say,
how picky is the user? Would you say
I think they're getting pickier. We've got over 1 million users now worldwide, and many of which, of course, are using it on a daily basis for professional commercial work. You know, when you have that level of user, and they're doing it for important projects, then yeah, I wouldn't say they're picky, but they absolutely give us most fantastic feedback, because we now are getting people using it for all different types of use cases that we hadn't even perhaps imagined. And you know, we've got a very active community on the forum, and people let us know, you know, come up with ideas about how we can make the apps work better, make features work better, or of course just new feature suggestions. And so I wouldn't say they're picky, but we get, you know, I think it's another big thing for us is that we want to remain always constantly focused on the creative user, you know, because that's obviously what our customer is, but we actually really enjoy talking to them.
These are the guys who have been using something else for the past decade or two, right? And now they're just saying, and some of them I've seen him even blogging about it. So I'm dropping Photoshop, I'm dropping Illustrator because I found this, and then they show this amazing artwork that they can produce with the Affinity products, and it must feel great.
Well, it does. I mean, I think one of the things is there's obviously a few things with our apps, you know, and of course price is one of them, and you know, people are always going to try and you know, potentially save money and what have you. But I think the thing that is fantastic and what we've loved seeing is actually many people, even if price wasn't part of the equation, they'd still choose to use our apps. And I think that the reason for that is that you know, we because we've built these apps from scratch in a relatively recent time frame, focused on some of the latest technologies that we can use, and not just like things like multi-core processors, but of course now also like GPU power and acceleration that we can get. We've definitely got significant performance advantages on you know, a whole number of sort of use cases that people might do. And the other thing is that I think what I really like about our apps is that we've managed to strip back a lot of the bloat that people have been used to in other applications. You know, even our legacy software, for example, and you know, I think something like Photoshop is you know, when it's been in development for 30 years, you keep adding new features every year and try to cover this kind of whole wide range of use cases. The UI becomes very kind of cluttered. You end up with 1 million tools down the left-hand side with loads of flyouts, and whereas you know, we've really tried to focus on the majority of use cases, but to sort of strip it back, you know, to that. I mean, actually, one of the reasons why we can do that, I think, is that you know, we've got this concept of personas that you would have seen in the app. So we organised the UI, I think, quite well with that. But also because we've got a shared file format, it means that we don't have to be so worried about sort of features that potentially belong in a different application. So, for us, we're not going to have loads of publishing features put into Affinity Photo, and we won't put loads of vector features into it because it's not that painful, to switch between the apps because they share the same file format, if that makes sense.
Do you think they could be one app in the future?
It's something that we're thinking about, to be honest. So, there's, definitely I think in the case of someone who is working on, say, something like a publication, there's obvious benefits if you could just, rather than actually, even though we've got shared file format, beyond that, you could foresee something where you could just click a button and you just automatically go into using the other app without having to save and reload it and all that type of stuff. For us, it's something that's is actually more achievable than most because we've got this kind of core back-end code that all the apps sort of share in a way. So I think it could be quite interesting.
It looks like Apple has a preference for Affinity. I've seen Affinity highlighted in the App Store many times. It was highlighted like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned you've been on stage demoing it. And how's that relationship with Apple?
The relationship with Apple is fantastic. Certainly in terms of the exposure that they've given us is fantastic. We've got a very close relationship with the sort of the dev relations guys, and so we're always communicating with them when we've got updates and whatever sort of coming. And we've got a very good relationship. We go on press tours with them. I've been to Apple Regent Street store a number of times now to do sort of demos and sort of showcases and what have you. Yeah, it's fun working with those guys. I've had the opportunity to go to Apple Park recently, which was obviously that's just an amazing building, and so it's good.
Ash, thank you so much for the conversation, for talking to us.
No worries.
Congratulations for the apps and the best of luck.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Cheers, mate. Thank you.